in case anybody misses the session, they can catch up. But also, if you wanted to review something that was said or an example or the like, you can go back. And yeah, so recording. And okay, so this module, it's all about well, the mechanics of the safe system assessment, as I said. So we're going to point you at some guidelines the different jurisdictions has. New South Wales doesn't have specific guidelines at this stage, just utilises the Austroads framework, and then sort of the practice is utilising a few of the features from the South Australian and Victorian guidelines and the like. But I'll take you through that. I'll walk you through that. How to complete the matrix, the safe system assessment matrix. That's the meat of a safe system assessment. How to write up the report, and we're looking for consistency across Australia and New Zealand in the reporting of safe system assessments. So everybody can pick them up. They know what to expect. It's all the same. And a bit about categorizing our treatments into primary or supporting. So the treatments are, in this case, really recommendations that we're making. Now, hopefully you'll remember our friend Wally. He'll appear a few times in this session. And of course, there is a quiz at this one just to get you back in the swing of things, as well as your assignment, which is to do a safe system assessment, a mock safe system assessment that we've sort of pared back to make it a bit quicker, because we don't want you to be taking up too much of your valuable time on this, but just we want you to show that you understand it, have a play around with the safe system assessment matrix. Okay, you'll remember we talked about the safe system. We had a good discussion about the philosophy of the safe system and why this is the approach to road safety. We talked about different elements. We looked at different diagrams, but I just picked this one. We talked about human bodies are vulnerable. We talked about that taking into account mistake making by the users of the system and trying to manage the energy and that shared responsibility, meaning that we as system designers can't ignore and can't just push the blame to a road user. And that we've got all these different elements of the system. So the road users, the roads and roadsides, the speeds, the vehicles, all interacting. And we did talk then also about the fact that it's a fairly philosophical approach. It's this nice thing that chief executives and ministers love to sort of sign up to because it all sounds so good. But us at the practitioner end on the ground making decisions about projects, and it becomes a bit airy fairy sometimes. And so what's a tool that we can use, and that's what the safe system assessment is. Yeah, so those key principles I talked about there already. Then we delved into let's explore this safe system philosophy and bring it back to a risk formula. And we talked about exposure, likelihood, and severity, and splitting out, I suppose, exposure from likelihood. In a lot of risk assessments, obviously, those two are combined just into likelihood. But in this safe system assessment framework, we've gone with that, and there's some reasoning behind that. It's a reminder. It shows that if we can eliminate that exposure to crashes, we get some really great wins. The likelihood, there's a whole lot we can still do in likelihood, and the severity in its own element. So, and when we get to that severity, we had a look at lots of different charts and curves and colored graphs and things that give us some good insights into the energy and the likely survivability of different crash types for our population. You'll remember this one, I hope, with the pedestrians in the green, the right angle side impact in the red, the head-ons in the yellow, and the fact that we sort of took that 10% line, that point where it exponentially goes up of 30 kilometers per hour, 50 kilometers per hour, 70 kilometer per hour impact speed as some decent threshold. Now, a lot of you have been doing that and known this sort of stuff. This is sort of the safe system fundamentals, basics. There's a little bit more information that we delved into, getting different angles of crashes, getting a bit more angle on it, talking about some other crash types, side impact with poles, pedestrians. I've put this again at the start of these notes just to remind you, something you can easily flick back to as you're doing that assessment. But really what today is all about is how do we do these safe system assessments? Knowing the philosophy, the basis of it, hugely important. In fact, you can't do safe system assessments without doing what we went through and making sure we're all really understanding that. And how do we actually do these safe system assessments? And I'm gonna put a poll up. I suppose it's not a quiz, this one. It's just a poll. But I'm just interested to see from the people we've got here, what your experience or your involvement with safe system assessments has been to date. So could be nothing. Safe system what now? You've heard of the term, but you don't know much more. Had one done on one of your projects, you've done one, or you live, breathe and eat safe system assessments. So hopefully that's popping up on your screen. It may not be. I know that some firewalls, oh no, look, we've got lots of people voting, that's good. I'll assume it's coming up on most of your screens, but we'll give it a second and we'll see how we're going. Now remember, we will be having a break about halfway through today's session. So that'll be a good chance to fill up the water and and I'll be taking you through some live examples as we go. But most people in, I'll assume the others are probably just struggling with the, oh no, there we go. Everybody's had a vote. Well done. Let's end that and let's have a look at the results there. Okay, so, at least everybody's heard of them, heard the term, but don't know much more. And we've got a few people that have had them done on their projects, so that's good. And a couple of people that have done them and got in there and got involved. Well, that's great. I will be going through sort of the basics of it, but it's good to know that most people at least are aware of them, and that's probably very much the way across Australia and New Zealand. This is becoming a tool that is integral into project development and the way we're going about ensuring road safety in projects, and so complementing road safety audits. But safe system assessments are starting to take over as the early stage concept, feasibility stage intervention. Okay, Brad's saying it's a bit more than he expected in New South Wales, or Transport for New South Wales. Yeah, no, it's certainly over the last year has really started to take off. Yeah, I'll give you a bit more info about sort of that next session, and we'll talk about policy and how it best fits within projects and the processes that you can and should follow. But this session's really about, all right, how do you do this? Because if you get out there and do one, I think you'll see extra value to it. You'll see ways that it can be used that I won't see because I don't know your business operations. You'll be able to pick that up. But the safe system assessment framework was developed by Austroads and released late 2016. I was on the working group for this one. I wasn't one of the authors of it, but it's on the working group, and there was lots of great discussion. And it really was just trying to provide something to answer that question that people kept asking, or the debate they kept having with, is it safe system or not? Now that's got a degree of silliness to that question because it's not binary, safe system. It's not either it is safe system or it's not. It's like, how well does it align with these principles that we've got? Anyway, so Ostrodes, was developing this up, and it took an interesting approach to it, and you'll see that play out as I give you some examples. But the document sort of separated into sections, which the assessment is also separated into these sections, but a good delving into the objectives of the project. So understanding what the project's trying to achieve is important, and then understanding, okay, what type of assessment are we going to do? We're going to be doing really in-depth, or we're just going to do a light touch. The context of the project links directly from that, obviously. And then this thing, the safe system assessment matrix. And that's as I said, the meat of it. We'll spend quite a bit of time doing. But that's where we start to quantify. We put numbers to exposure, likelihood, and severity for different crash types for the road environment and the design that you're looking at. We do, in a full safe system assessment at least, delve into these other elements or pillars of the safe system. The road users, the vehicles, the post-crash care. And a little bit of a look at sort of things like, can it be maintained, some more of that wider safety and design thinking. And then we provide these recommendations and treatments, and we categorize those. So the consumer of the report can get an idea of what will give the best alignment with safe system principles if they alter things. Okay, I mentioned a few guidelines, and the two jurisdictions that have put out their own, I suppose you could almost call them supplements to the Ostrodes guide. I would say they're more clarifications and extra. So, well, yeah, that's kind of what a supplement is, really. It's Victoria and South Australia. Those are the documents there. They're pretty much the same, apart from the covers and the organisation that they talk about. So there's a bit of consistency happening there. New Zealand certainly follows a very similar process. New South Wales generally following the same as well. So I've put them into Moodle, and you'll be able to download those if you want. I mean, they are publicly available. You just Google Safe System Assessment Guidelines, you'd find them. But I've popped them in there for ease. Okay, I want to start right, I suppose, at the end. And I want to show you what sort of things are being produced. And then we'll go right back to the start, and I'll step you through how you get to something like this. So this is sort of an executive summary output, one of the outputs that you'd be expecting to see. And what you're seeing there is, on the bottom here, crash types, right? Run-off road, head-on, intersection, other, pedestrian, cyclist, motorcyclist. So they're crash types. And on the y-axis here, we have safe system assessment score. Okay, and you'll see there that there's different scores for these different crash types. And you'll see in the red bars will be the existing conditions. So what is existing? This is obviously an intersection. What's existing? And somebody's gone through and scored the existing conditions. And then that looks like they've got three design options. They've got the orange, the blue, and the grey. The orange seems to be a roundabout design. The blue seems to be a modified T intersection with a set of traffic signals, and the conventional T and traffic signals is the grey. And then you can immediately see that the lower the score, the better for each of these crash types, how the building this facility, upgrading this intersection will impact on these scores. So you can see there that the run-off road alters, or we can immediately see there that, okay, interesting. The roundabout actually will make things a little worse for cyclists, but it's doing much better it's doing better for pedestrians, it's doing better for other, it's doing better for intersections. So you're getting that general idea. So don't worry if that's a bit confusing at the moment. We'll come back to it. I'm going to run through this for a second. I'm just going to have a quick look here at some questions. From memory, the current supplement SSA seems to work in progress regarding who should undertake the SSA. For RSA, there is an accreditation process. Thoughts on the same for SSAs? Who should be doing SSAs? Great question. And I do deal with that in our next module and show you the Victorian Register of Safe System Assessors and the South Australian one as well. So again, those two jurisdictions have actually got some criteria and published that. So the same as, well, in a similar vein to road safety auditor accreditation and the like. There's no levels as such. It's just the whether you're on the list or not. New South Wales, again, just sort of, usually it's people that have completed this course and shown that they know how to do it at the moment, but it may be something that is picked up. There is a big bit of Austroads work going on at the moment around accreditation, training for road safety auditing and looking for some national harmonisation. So, you know, the auditor from Queensland can audit in New South Wales without having to get on the New South Wales register and vice versa, and those sorts of things. It may pick up a little bit of discussion about safe system assessments and whether they should be integrated in. Queensland's currently, considering just adding a tick box next to auditors that have successfully completed this course, as they can do safe system assessments as well. But we'll see how that plays out. But at the moment, New South Wales doesn't have anything formalised. Okay, so I mentioned there earlier, when you're asked to do a safe system assessment, the first thing you want to do is understand the context of the project, or the, you know, why is this being built? What's the environment it's being built in? What's the land use and those sort of things. The Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework provides these prompt questions, and that's a great structure to start with in terms of asking about the project. And you can see there what's the reason for the project, what's the function of the road, the speed environment, what are the road users that are present, what's the vehicle composition. Now, within that, there are sort of sub questions of all of them. These are not the only questions you can ask. It's just helping you get a rounded understanding of, you know, what's currently there, what's being planned, why is it being planned. Some of these will help you in your scoring. And some of them will help you in making recommendations that are actually genuinely going to be useful to the project team. Right? We really want this to be a useful process. We don't want it to produce stuff that they go, oh, yeah, okay, you suggested grade separation. We knew that would be great. It's $30 million over the budget we've got, so we're not going to do that. Like, it's about providing things that move us closer to the safe system objectives, but are realistic in what we've got out there. Now, what I do, just as a practical thing, is, so as soon as we've been asked to do a safe system assessment, I will send this as a Word document and say, oh, we're looking to gather intel on these questions. Can you jot down anything or provide us with any existing documentation? You know, they might have done planning studies, they might have traffic modeling, they might have done bits and pieces that you can grab, and it helps you to build that context. Then you can have an initial meeting with the project team, the design team, or the like, and you can discuss a bit of this. You can ask some of these questions, you can delve in a bit more and get a real understanding for the project. So those are in the Austroads guide, and they're in the templates that we're going to provide you. So there's a few publicly available templates, and we've used one of them, and you'll be using one of them, and these questions appear in that template. Now, for your mock assessments at the end of this session, we're not going to get you to do a lot of that background because, well, some of the projects are completely hypothetical just to get you practicing the process, so it's not worth delving deep into this sort of stuff. But then we jump into the safe system assessment matrix. And And I'm going to spend a fair bit of time on this. But you'll see some familiar things. And for the couple of you who have done safe system assessments, or those who have received them as well, you'll be quite comfortable with this. But you'll see there, the rows of the matrix here are exposure, likelihood, and severity. Okay, so that should make you comfortable and happy, hopefully, because remember, through those first 3 modules, I just kept saying, is that exposure? Is that likelihood? Is that severity? You did an assignment where you started categorizing things into exposure, into likelihood, into severity. And the reason for that is it's so important in these assessments that we categorize correctly into exposure, into likelihood, into severity, to ensure we don't double count anything. So then across the columns, you see these crash types. So run-off road, head-on, and intersection. Now, these 3 are associated with vehicles. So cars, trucks, okay? Pedestrians are any crashes that involve a pedestrian being the one that's injured. So vehicle strikes pedestrian. If a cyclist was to strike a pedestrian in your sort of imagining of problems and challenges, and you believe that the pedestrian was the one that would be injured, it would be pedestrian crash. Same with a motorcyclist. So it's about the sort of injured party. Now, if you thought, oh well, both the cyclist and the pedestrian would be injured, you'd actually allocate it in both cyclists and pedestrians then. But really, the bulk of the pedestrian ones, we're thinking about vehicles hitting pedestrians, or the swept path, rolling over a pedestrian or the like. Cyclists, obviously the cyclist being injured, and motorcyclists, the motorcyclist being the one that's injured. Now, if a motorcyclist, for example, was to run off the road, would you put that in motorcyclist, or would you put that in run off road? Well, you'd put it in motorcyclist, because remember, that's the road user that's being injured there, and if you can categorize it and get it there. So what we actually find is that for motorcyclists, we're sort of taking into account the intersection crashes, the head-on crashes, the run-off road crashes for the motorcyclists. And are there specific characteristics that increase the frequency or the severity of that for motorcyclists? But we'll get to that as I sort of do work examples and show you different bits and pieces on this. Now, those 6, run-off road, head-on, intersection, pedestrian, cyclists, and motorcyclists crashes, cover the bulk of almost all of the death and serious injury crash types in New South Wales, in Australia, in New Zealand as well. The other crash category is there to capture anything that doesn't quite fit into these. Now, that could be sideswipe crashes. It could be crashes with trains, level crossing crashes. It could be light rail crashes with light rail. These sorts of particular crashes that don't seem to fit into any of those other categories. Now, rear end crashes are a really interesting one, and there was a lot of debate. Many hours worth of people debating this, which you sort of, you marvel at. Rear end crashes fit into the other category if it's not generated from an intersection. So if you have an intersection and there's queuing traffic from the intersection, and the rear end happens back a queue crash, that will fit in with our intersection categorization. But if it's a mid-block crash, if it's you know, a school crossing and then it's a rear end at the end of that, that's not an intersection, it's a crossing, then we'll categorize that into the other. Crashes with animals we put into the other category, but as many of you will know who have been sort of analyzing crashes and deal with crash history, that we see a lot of sort of run-off road crashes, which we suspect animals were somehow involved in. People were avoiding animals or the like and running off the road. So you got to take a little bit of that with a grain of salt. But they're the columns we've got in this matrix. And so what we're aiming to do is put a number into each of the cells of this matrix. And the number should be between 0 and 4. So how do we get to that? So what we do is we utilize, straight out of the Austrade Safe System Assessment Framework, a scoring reference sheet. And so you can see here, we've got scores of 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we've got some information about exposure, likelihood, and severity. So let's have a look here. Let's just jump in and have a look at what would a score of 2 be for exposure. Volumes of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are moderate, therefore exposure is moderate. For run-off road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT is between 1,000 and 5,000. For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcyclists, between 10 and 50 units per day. So we have clear, tangible numbers to play with here. Okay. And assuming that you have traffic volume, let's start with the AADT vehicles. Assuming you have a traffic volume for this stretch of road or the intersecting roads, it's quite easy to then score the exposure, at least for run-off road, head-on, intersection, and potentially other. So if you are dealing with a stretch of road and it has an AADT of 3,000 vehicles a day, you simply will be able to go, right, 3,000 is between 1,000 and 5,000, so it's going to get a score of 2. You'll see there that for a 3, it's between 5,000 and 10,000. A 4 is greater than 10,000. These are just for AADT and your average daily traffic. Less than 1,000 for 1. And 0 is saying that there's no exposure to that crash. So it could be that, you know, the intersection is separated. I'll come back to that. But okay, so we've got 3,000 vehicles a day. We looked on our scoring sheet and we know that it's a 2. 3,000 vehicles a day is a 2. So we can put a 2 in there. Now, for the exposure cells, you don't need to do much justification because it's pretty clear cut. If you have traffic volume and it's given you a range and it fits within that range, that's it. A few little tweaks you can come to, but we'll get to that. Run-off road, 2. Head-on is also a 2 because the same number of vehicles are exposed to that, assuming that's your two-way AADT. Intersections is an interesting one. So intersections, then if you've got 3,000 vehicles on the main road and you have a side road and it's got sort of 10 vehicles and that's your intersection that you're dealing with, you still sit in 2. But if the side road also had 3,000 vehicles, what we do is add those. So you add the 2 to get to 6,000 for intersections, and that would be between 5,000 and 10,000. So you'd give it a 3 So you may have an intersection there, and it could be a 3 because you've got the addition of the two AADT or two streams there intersect. Other crash type will really depend on what you're looking at, but most always, or not, yeah, pretty much always, it's the same as your head-on runoff road because it's side swipes, rear end, mid blocks, or the like. So we're going to put a 2 there. Now, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. We saw, if we go to our scoring reference sheet, let's go to the 2 again. For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcycle crashes types, volumes are 10 to 50 units per day. And what we find a lot of the time is that there is not accurate pedestrian data, cyclist data. Sometimes motorcyclists, sometimes we get because they sometimes are collected with the traffic counts. But yeah, pedestrians and cyclists, you don't often get good traffic counts. So what you do is you make a judgment call. You might gather intel as you talk to the project team, what they know. You might know the area really well and go, yep, okay, it's hardly ever used by pedestrians, or or cyclists, or no, I know that cyclists don't use this at all, or yep, no, I know it's quite a common commuter route, or the like. So you're really going to have to make a bit of a judgment call often on this. If you had data, head counts or something, wonderful. But you're really then sort of relying on these sort of words: moderate, high, very high. So it's helping you guide you in terms of where you're going to score it. So perhaps maybe on this one, it's sort of moderate to low pedestrian volumes. So, this is just some hypothetical we're doing. So we decided to make it a 2 and a 2 for cyclists. And motorcyclists, well, we don't really have any data for that. So what we will do is use a rule of thumb, which is 1% of AADT, which would then make it a 2 as well. So what we've got there now is some quantification of the exposure to different crash types at this intersection, or this length of road, or whatever the area is that we're undertaking this safe system assessment. There are complications if it's a long route. There are complications, in that particular sort of asset. If you've got multiple intersections to deal with, I'm going to sort of hold off some of that complication until we just get the simple bit clear in our mind, and then we can have a chat about some of those more complicated scenarios. We'll keep going, and we'll have a break in about 20 minutes. So, okay, we're happy we've got exposure. Now what we need to do is come up with some quantification for the chance that a crash will happen. So we've got crash likelihood. We've got some information in that. Again, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But let's have a look at a 2. I'm using the 2 as the first one we use. It is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Well, that's not much information, is it? So let's go up to a 3. It is likely that a crash type will occur. Well, this isn't really helping us a huge amount, is it? Okay, let's go have a look at a 4. The likelihood of individual road user error leading to crash is high given the infrastructure in place. High approach speed to a sharp curve, priority movement control, filtering across several lanes of opposing traffic, high speeds. Okay, we're starting to get a little bit more meat on the bone there. Let's go down to a 1. Highly unlikely. A 0. There's only minimal chance a crash will occur for an individual road user given the infrastructure in place. Only extreme rival behavior, substantial vehicle failure could lead to a crash. This may mean, for example, that true traffic streams do not cross grade, which actually in practical reality, we'll probably put that in over there. So I'm just going to, there's a few things, and this one, that's one of the clarifications out of that the Victorians and the South Australians have done in their supplement, because there's a few little things that probably just weren't, well, it was hardly ever any of them were done when the Australian document was produced, so they had to clarify a few things. But we're basically saying a 0 would only be absolute minimal chance, and that takes into account humans being humans. So really, you pretty much never score anything at 0 for crash likelihood. Okay, but when we're getting to this likelihood, we need to think of it from a relative sense. Okay. For like intersections, like lengths of road, and you think through the characteristics of that road environment that influence the likelihood of a crash. And so you can see here in this sort of shell that there are some things to start you thinking, to help you thinking. So what are some of the things that are going to influence head-on crashes? The geometry of the road, the separation, the delineation and guidance, the speed, etc. And there's the etc. is probably important because there's heaps of other things that may influence the chance of a head-on crash occurring. That doesn't have a wide center line, will fit into the separation, you know, with the operating speeds. It could be the etc. Could be things like, you know, is this out in the middle of nowhere where people have been driving for a very long time? They're more likely to be fatigued, drift out of their lane. You know, you could be looking at the geometry. It could be drawing people into these scenarios. Does it have audio tactile centerline? Lots of things that you'd be asking to gather a basis for whether you're going to score this a 0, a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. But in the end, there is some subjectivity to this. Now, people get a little bit worried when they hear, oh, it's this subjectivity to this. I'll show you why at the moment that shouldn't matter. Maybe if we start using this to make decisions, programming decisions in terms of, well, are we going to fund a roundabout there, or are we going to fund the central barrier system over there? We might get in a little bit more of a pickle in the subjectivity of this assessment process. But at the moment, it's it works out. I'll explain that shortly. But what you do is you don't simply think of these things and plonk a number into the matrix. You actually have to justify it with some dot points in the cell of the matrix to show these are the characteristics of this intersection that I believe make the chance of a crash go up, and these are the things that make the chance of a crash go down. And you dot point those out, and then you arrive at your score. And you know, there's a bit of work to it. I'll show you you know, some real safe system assessments. You see that there's actually there's a bit of, you know, there's a bit of justification in there. It's not just a number. And in fact, when you do your mock safe system assessment, if you were to just pop a number in there, you wouldn't pass. We actually want to see you logically justify and think about the elements and the characteristics of this area that are influencing your scoring. And you'll dot point those out. And then you will arrive at some numbers. And you might, you know, end at a 2 and a 3, your intersection might, oh, sorry, 3. Your intersection, you might say, is really great, and you've got a 1, and you know, and so on and so on. You just go through that. It's going to be easier when I show you one that's filled out with some actual documentation, but you end up with numbers in there. Now you remember, you've got to remember that the volume of traffic has already been stripped out of likelihood. So you need to do this and bring it back to an individual's likelihood, and you need to do it at a relative, in a relative nature. So you can't say that the chance of runoff road crash, the likelihood of runoff road crash is high because there's so many vehicles, inevitably one of them is going to run off the road. Okay, because you've already taken into account all those vehicles by the volume. And so that's one of the beauties of this methodology, is that it sort of stripped that out. So you're just really focusing on the characteristics of the infrastructure and the design that are bringing forward that issue. Then we go into severity. Okay, so that we've now got a crash that is happening. How bad is it going to be? And we've got a bit more information and a bit more guidance on this one. So exposure is usually not too subjective. Pedestrians and cyclists get a little bit, you've got to use a bit of judgment and the like. Likelihood is quite subjective at this stage, and severity is somewhere in between. Because we know those biomechanics, those crash types, the physics of it, the energies, and the likelihood of death and serious injury as a result. So if we go to, again, I'm going to use the 2 as a starting point. Should a crash occur, it is unlikely that it will result in a fatality or serious injury to any road user involved. Kinetic energies are moderate. The majority of the time are effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. So that could be dissipated by time, running along a barrier, could be by energy absorbing characteristics of a crash cushion, or it could be just that the speed of impact is low or the angles are within what we think is tolerable. But what we've done to try to make life a little bit easier is to create this general guidance sheet, general indication only. I can't stress this enough. You're going to need a bit of judgment, but it helps you start, thinking about. And you'll see there that we've graded it from a 0 to a 4, and we've got the crash types. So we've got the, we've got head-on car to car, head-on heavy vehicle to car. We've got pedestrian versus car, pedestrian versus heavy vehicle, because we're taking into account mass, velocity, and this is delta V. This is your change in velocity, which I should add. So if you've got 2 cars accelerating together, the delta V is obviously not as big. But you can then just get a general indication and say, oh, well, cyclist versus car, we think the crashes might be happening around 40 kilometers per hour in a delta V scenario. We're sort of sitting in the 2 to 3 category, and then you maybe make some judgments as to which side of that. But it's very graded, and it's very, much a judgment, but you're able to then utilize this to help you. And that will help you then in allocating these scorings out. And so they'll be heavily influenced by the speed. Speed is going to be the biggest factor here. Speed, and it's not speed limit, it's the operating speed, the speed you predict impacts at. So the speed will be a huge factor. Any energy dissipating, absorbing characteristics, furniture, or the likes of barriers, cushions, pole protectors, anything like that, angles, you'll be really sort of dot pointing these things down. Percentage of heavy vehicles tends to influence here a bit. I wouldn't say it, dramatically will change your scoring, because you've got to take everything into account, but those are the sort of features you could be thinking about. You may even, if the land use and the characteristics and the road users are maybe particularly old, you may actually decide, I'm going to bump up the pedestrian score a little bit here, because it's a high proportion of older road users. older pedestrians crossing the road, nursing home and hospital and these sorts of things. Now, if crashes happen, the severity is likely to be higher because of their frailty. So you can even take into account that sort of very specific nuanced stuff within your assessment. And so then you'll be utilizing the crash types you're predicting, and you'll be then coming back and saying, dot pointing out a few of those ideas, speed's high, or speed, you might say speed's medium, it's got barrier systems on the roadside, so I'm going to give it a 2. Head on, well, there's nothing protecting, and I'm going to give it, well, we know though that head on crashes, you can survive higher speeds than running off the road and hitting trees and the like, because of the crumple zones, the airbags, the seat belts, all operating for that frontal impact. So maybe this one we also give a 2 though, because the roadside had barriers maybe. Intersections, maybe we've got a 3. Others a 1, because we know side swipes and rear ends are probably one of the, for passenger vehicles, the highest speed can happen. Pedestrians a 4, because they're highly vulnerable. 4, whatever you've ended up justifying. I'm going to take you through a couple of actual work examples of all this with real stuff, but I just wanted to give you the theory first, and then we go into it. So there we go. We've ended up with this populated matrix of numbers and justification and characteristics that you've looked at. And we get to the point where we go and we multiply these scores. So we take the runoff road and we say 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, and we get a score of 8. And then we can go 2 times the 3 is 6, times 2 is 12. And so the 3 times 1 is 3, times 3 is 9. And you're immediately starting to see here that we're arriving at total scores for each of these crash types. And you then add up all these scores if you want to get to a total score, and you get a total score out of 448. And that is your safe system assessment score. The ultimate would be to get a 0. The worst alignment with safe system principles would be 448. Now there's a little, I suppose, trick of numbers here. Not really a trick, but it's, the fact that if you were to put a 0 in any of these cells and you multiply through, multiplying anything by 0 gives 0, doesn't it? So for example, if you had a 0 here, because this area had no pedestrians, absolutely no pedestrians, right? 0 times, it becomes a 0, basically. I mean, it is a 0. 0 times anything. So if also, well, sorry, let me step back. If there's no pedestrians in an area, so the exposure is 0, we don't care what the likelihood or the severity of crash is, because there's no pedestrians there. Likewise, if you could put a 0 in likelihood, no, so this one's back to 2. We don't actually care how many pedestrians are exposed to the crash and how bad it will be, because we can say that there will be no crashes. There is no likelihood of crash. I mean, that's your airplane risk management philosophy. Get your likelihood to 0, or pretty much to 0. Now, as I say, that's a very hard one for us to do for so many complex reasons that I don't think I have ever put a 0 in a likelihood column, in a likelihood row in a safe system assessment. I can't think of one immediately. So you're usually always at a 1, maybe a 0.5, although we discourage the use of 0.5s, but you can go to 8.5. You can't go any more precise than that. No going to 3 decimal places, as much as I know you want to. In fact, that was one of the big debates that came out with the working group. Is the idea of numbers came out really prominently, because it was really nice to be able to use that 0 to eliminate a risk, like a crash type. It also gave us something that we could kind of compete with the traffic modeling reports and the like, and I'm sure you've all had it, the big, traffic modeling, the microstimulation report, or the SIDRA report comes out, and it's got lots of tables and numbers and lots of impressive stuff, and everybody's this is very good. And then the road safety audit sort of comes in with what everybody then starts to have opinions on, and I don't agree with this and that and those sorts of things. So putting some numbers to it, and it gives us into that sort of space and a bit more rigor to it. But one of the things, we said, oh my God, if we put numbers out there and in this, and we hand it over to technical people, they're just going to run it off a cliff with attempted precision at it. And it very much was the case. And early safe system assessments we saw coming back with, a couple of decimal places for some of these, and then multiplying it out, and then you add some. And so we saw like numbers spitting out which had 3-4 decimal places. And it's crazy, because this is meant to be a broad brush assessment. It is never meant to have that absolute precision. We're working on some tools to get you more precision and more consistency, and linking to existing models like OSRAP and the like. But for now, you use it as a general risk assessment methodology, the same way you would decide between, is that low likelihood or medium likelihood of crash. So think of it like that, those bands. But if you were to be able to put a 0 for severity, of course, we don't then care what the exposure to the crash is or the chance of the crash, because when all these crashes happen, nobody will be killed or seriously injured. But I always put a disclaimer on that and say, if you get a 4 in exposure and a 4 in likelihood and a 0 in severity, you're probably going to have a whole lot of minor bingles and scrapes and bits and pieces, because there's something not going right there. And so that's just a general traffic operations, road operations, traffic engineering issue that should be dealt with. So I always sort of say, just be aware of that. But for pure safe system thinking, no death and serious injury, that's what our ultimate outcome we want is. Okay, so that's taking you through that, and you can see then you get 448. Each of these is out of 64. It must be, it is, and you've got this way to put scores to a matrix. So let's actually, it's probably a good time to take a break there, and then I will show you through a worked example where you can see this is actually a fairly simplistic one, and we can start to see how they're populated, how you get to the scoring, and then I'll show you a real report, and then we'll give you your assignment. But let's take 5 minutes now. Please, if you have any questions at this stage, type them in during the 5 minutes. Take your time to do that. If you want to ask some verbal questions, pop your hand up in this time as well. Otherwise, back in 5 minutes. Okay, let's get back into it. So the first thing you do for any safe system assessment is undertake an assessment of the existing conditions. So you're given a design maybe of intersection upgrades. The first thing you do is go and look at the existing intersection and you score that intersection in exactly the way that we've just gone through there. So, pen working again. Existing conditions. So the reason you do this is to set that baseline that you can then adjust off. And that's one of the reasons why it's not so critical that we have absolute consistency in likelihood. It's okay for some subjectivity because it's all coming off this existing baseline that's been set by that person making that judgment as well, or that team making that judgment. So we've got this sort of benchmark and then we work off that. So the existing conditions is scored and justified first. And you can see an example of one here. And this is actually, I think for, it was a very light sort of one, which I use as this example because it doesn't go too crazy. It's an intersection here. It's give-way controlled intersection. It's on the outskirts of or the approach to a township. You can see a downhill road there. You can see it's got some lighting. It's got some edge line, not much shoulder. There's a bit of a structure just near the intersection there. No, there's the structure. You can see there's a bit of a footpath, some power poles, some guideposts, and the like. And what they're planning to do there, or they've got a few ideas. One is to build a roundabout, and that's their roundabout sort of design. This is probably a nice stage to do a safe system assessment as well. You've got a bit of info, but you don't have, it hasn't gone too far down the design line. There's the modified P signalized intersection. That's their option 2. And there's their conventional T intersection as option 3 with a slip lane or a couple of slip lanes and the like. So first thing is the existing conditions. What's out there? You look at it, you look at the exposure, how many vehicles are going through there, what's the likelihood, and then you can see here, and don't expect you to read this, you'll get some examples and other things. But factors that increase the likelihood of crash. So the curve, the speed, lack of shoulders, missing guideposts, no curve and channel, and things that decrease the likelihood of crash, wide lanes, good advisory speed, edge line, street line. And so those have been sort of factored in, and then they've made their decision on a score. Now they've gone a 0.5 on this one, and most of the time 0.5 sort of end up when you've got your team and they can't agree between a 2 and a 3, and you end up sort of settling the difference and just going with a 0.5. So I've gone with a 2.5. As I say, we just sort of try to minimize the use of decimal places. You can go to the 0.5 if you need, but nothing more precise than that. Then they've done the same with, increase for severity, fixed hazards, point source hazards, and the like in culverts, no barrier system, and things that decrease. Well, speed coming out of the town will be low, so you've got that sort of lower operating speed coming out. So you can see they've done a bit of justification on this. So some people and some more comprehensive assessments will have a bit more justification than this, but this is sort of looking okay. And you can see there that then they've arrived at their scores out of 64. They've added those up. They've got 118.5 out of 448 as their safe system assessment score for the existing conditions, their sort of baseline. Then they go and they look at the design. And so the first design was that roundabout. What they do is then take the existing conditions matrix, copy it, paste it, and then cross parts out of it that will be removed when the roundabout is constructed, or add new things to it, things that emerge as a result of the roundabout. So you can see there, so they've crossed out some of these things there. They've added a few other things in red, crossed a few out here, added a few things in red. And then you can see there that the scores that have changed, they've colored. Any scores to stay the same, they haven't. So this then starts to show the reader how things have adjusted as a result of them building what they're planning to build for. And you do that for each option. So you go back and you copy that existing conditions, the baseline matrix, paste it, adjust it. And you can just keep doing that for as many options as they have. And what that ends up with is your ability to, first of all, give an overarching ranking of these project proposals based on their total safe system assessment score relative to the existing conditions. So for this one, you can see it was 118.5. And we see that the roundabout brings the score down to 90. The modified T signalized 99, and the T intersection 105. So immediately you can see there that the roundabout has the best alignment with safe system principles. Everything that any of those designs improve our alignment with safe system principles compared to existing, but all of them can be better. None of them got zero, did they? And in fact, I've never seen a project get zero. But that's okay, because we're talking about trying to move us down that track and do the best job we can. But that's good. You get that immediate insight. You could present that in a graph, or if you like, so people can do it. I mean, I like to always try and make it as clear as possible to people which option we're talking about. If you can, use some symbols like that or something, that's always nice. And then this is the real thing that people want to see, those overarching scores. They want to see also where it's come from. What are the specific features that are generating those scores? And so then this is the kind of output the executives are usually looking for, or the project control groups, or the the project review committees, when they want to see that output. They want they might be saying, well, we want to see the SIDRA and is it level of service A, B, C, whatever, and what's the safe system assessment score, and how's that being generated? Now we've got that that sort of input. So that's the existing conditions in the red, each year options. But the final thing we do is to say, hey, here's a whole lot of ideas that can bring these scores down even further. All right. So yeah, we like you. Well, all your designs make things a bit better, but we want to make them even better, even greater. So you put recommendations in, or considerations, some people will call them, because recommendations is probably good. There's no legislative power with this or anything like that. A safe system assessment team can't tell a project what to do. They're just suggesting ideas that would make it better aligned with safe system principles. And then you're asked to categorize these. Now, this categorization is becoming more and more common. certainly, I've just finished with the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6, Road Safety Audit. We've finalised that. That's released. Some of you probably maybe logged into a webinar. Most jurisdictions make recommendations in road safety audits. New South Wales, not at this stage, but I think you will be moving to that. The auditors will make recommendations, or they're asked to categorise them into these same categories. Brad likes considerations more. I think we'll have a look at when I bring up a live safe system assessment, whether they use considerations or we use considerations or not. I tend to like it as considerations too. I really, it's not great when a external who does not know the full context of the project and all its challenges and everything like that makes these hard recommendations. I agree. Consideration is a friendlier way to do it. Anyway, so primary treatment. So this is when we've said, okay, we've assessed your intersection, the existing conditions. We've looked at all these options. So the roundabout you were planning to build, and so with that roundabout, here are some suggestions of what would make your score even lower for that roundabout. And the first suggestion maybe is separated bike facilities around the roundabout, making a Dutch style roundabout. Okay. And we would categorize that into maybe primary because we're virtually going to eliminate fatal or serious injuries for cyclists. Now, maybe that's a bit, maybe we won't, but okay, let's go with, we're going to do some raised pedestrian crossings on the approach to the roundabout. And for the pedestrians crossing at that point, we've virtually eliminated death and serious injury because they're so effective. And they reduce speed. And they take into account the fact that some drivers won't be completely alert, and the raised nature of it alerts them, they slow down. So those are sort of the primary. Supporting road planning, design and management consideration that improve the overall level of safety associated with foreseeable crash types, but not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injury. So these are often the things, almost always, that address likelihood only. So improving sight distance, lighting, delineation, surface improvements, clear zones or cleared areas of the roadside. We know that it's going to reduce the chance of a crash, but crashes will still happen. They'll still happen at speed, and death and serious injury will still be occurring. Little clarifier in there, it doesn't change the ability for a primary treatment to be implemented in the future, but we don't need to get too much into that. Non-safe system is pretty much in there just for terminology. We wouldn't expect anybody to be suggesting anything that fits into that non-safe system category, which is either that makes things worse or makes it really hard to do a really good thing into the future. Yeah, so basically you come up with a list of recommendations and you plonk them into these categories. And I will show you shortly, actually, that the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework has lists of treatments and then categorizes and has them categorized into these primary or supporting to help you, because it is hard to get your head around it. So you're going to get some intersection design to look at. You're going to score the existing conditions. You're going to score the design that's been given. And you're also going to come up with some alterations to that design that you want the designer to consider. And those will be categorized as either primary or supporting. So you might have a few primary and you might have a few supporting, or you might not have any primary treatments and you might just have supporting, because don't get confused with the term primary. It's not like it's your number one. It's that the best alignment with safe system principles. Okay, before I jump into a real, showing you a real one, I'll just say that there are then these extra questions that get asked within a safe system assessment. Now, it's up to you where you do this in the order of your safe system assessing. I like to do it fairly early on, but these are trying to think about the other, road user behavior characteristics, the vehicle characteristics, the post-crash care. These are not quantified. We don't put numbers to these. We just put any insights, any thoughts, anything you may notice, any ideas you might have that these could be improved. These are done in what we call a full safe system assessment. So the bigger one, which then you might often, of course, with your client's permission and the like, talk to the local police, get their insights, and you get ideas of these wider elements. But you'll see there the prompt questions straight out of the Austrade Safe System Assessment Framework are road users likely to be alert and compliant? Are there factors might influence this? What are the expected compliance and enforcement levels, alcohol, drug, speed, road rules, driving hours, and the like? What is the likelihood of driver fatigue? So we use that one. Is it out in the middle of nowhere, or are we in an urban setting with lots going on? So driver fatigue is probably not going to be a major likelihood factor there for us. Can enforcement activities be conducted safely? Are there special road users, entertainment precinct, elderly, children, on-road activity? So you can see some of these might be influencing the likelihood of crash, the severity of the crash, or might be just helping us get that general understanding. So an example in this one, can enforcement be conducted safely? Really great experience with one safe system assessment, $102 million outer urban road upgrade duplication. And so the safe system assessment team, we contacted the local police highway patrol, explained what the project was. So the team that engaged us said that, yep, that's fine, not a problem. Then just sort of sat down with them in a role plot and said, this is what they're planning. What do you think? Anything there that will you be able to do enforcement? And they had just some really interesting insights. I mean, there was continuous barrier being proposed, and then they wanted an area where they could park the number plate recognition vehicle. They could have the booze bus set up and the like. And there was a stack site that was an old stack site, and that could easily be incorporated into that. So some suggestions of minor tweaks to the design gave them a really great ability to undertake their activities, which is part of our holistic safe system, isn't it? And there's often good designers and project developers who are doing these sort of discussions anyway, but it's a nice sort of place to inject this thinking in here. Then we go to vehicles. What is the level of alignment with the ideals of safer vehicles? It's a pretty open-ended, generic question. It actually is more relevant when you do a safe system assessment of a whole community, like a remote community or a mine site or the like. And the safe system assessment framework is very scalable, and you can do that. I mean, think of it as a particular type of risk assessment methodology where you can use this process either on an individual intersection or a community or a mine site, or it works through quite nicely. And so, that one's really when you're looking at fleets and what people are driving and using. So often in your normal road project safe system assessment, that really gets a not applicable, or there's nothing out of the ordinary here. Other factors that might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles. The percentage of heavy vehicles too high for the proposed or existing road design is the route used by recreational motorcyclists. Other resources to detect non-roadworthy, overloaded, unregistered vehicles and remove them from the network. Can enforcement of these activities be conducted safely? So more of your heavy vehicle checks and the like. Has vehicle breakdown been catered for? Big one that sort of pops out for discussion often with the continuous barrier rollout jobs and those sorts of things. They're thinking about breakdown bays and access points and those sorts of things. And then post-crash care. Are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of severe injury, congestion, stopping access, and the like? Urban motorway assessments, often you're thinking about, well, how are we going to access if this whole thing's banked up? Do we need medium barrier brake things? I can't remember their technical name. Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently as possible? Are other road users' emergency response teams protected during the event of a crash? Are drivers provided correct information? Is there reliable information by radio, VMS, provision for e-safety, cooperative ITS? They're a bit of vehicles of the future sort of thinking, and often, again, it's a real not applicable or nothing out of the ordinary here, but it just may start some thinking. Mostly they're for big, usually these massive multi-billion-dollar road upgrade projects, and they're really sort of thinking about ITS systems and how that all works, and you can delve into a little bit of that. Post-crash care, I mean, just examples of things that have sort of popped out of that thinking. Certainly in New Zealand, safe system assessment was up in the mountains, and this one was discussed. That question brought out the fact that motorcyclists especially are crashing out there, and just the many hours it was taking emergency response teams to get there, and their lack of ability to land helicopters anywhere that was convenient or safe for them to do that, and trying to find bits of the road where they can land, and all sorts of challenges. And so they're the idea of helicopter, some dedicated helicopter landing areas being cleared and purpose built within a road upgrade project. So it's a pretty interesting sort of take on that, isn't it? That we're thinking more than just the barriers or the speeds and those sort of things, thinking holistically. Okay, any questions there before I jump out and start showing you a few different things and giving you your assignments? We'll pop them in as we go. For the Safe System Assessment Report, hang on, here we go. Post-crash care in the Hunter, we have installed satellite phones to assist emergency service response time for lack of mobile coverage. You see, that's another great example there of holistically thinking about the system, and yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we hope will be brought out by the fact that these questions get asked in every project. A lot of them might be not relevant or something, but somebody has then had to think about that, had to ponder of it, had a discussion around each of those elements. That's a good example. Thanks, Ken. So the report, the Safe System Assessment Report, as I mentioned, there are templates available now. We're going to get you to use one of the templates, and we encourage you to take the template, rebrand it, do whatever you want, but do the same sections, cover off the same information. Let's all be consistent with this. So it really identifies the type of assessment, what the Safe System Assessment team, who comprise the team, list of meetings and inspections, description of the process. It is a new process, so a lot of people, well, relatively new process, been around 5 years or so now, but a lot of people still don't really know the process. So there's some words in there about the process, which you can just copy and use. Background of the project, context of the project from the using those prompt questions. Then your matrix and commentaries on each factor, and a matrix for each design option. Commentary on the other safe system elements, components, pillars, which we just went through those prompt question or those standard questions, and suggested treatments and ways to improve alignment with safe system principles. Okay, so your assignment and I'm going to go live into the assignment thing shortly, so I don't need to take you through this. But while I'm here, I will just say we're going to get you to go to a site near your house or near your office, whatever address you've sort of given us. We've chosen these sites because they are, we've risk assessed them, they're very safe. There's areas to park, which is very safe if you have to drive there. There's great areas to stand away from any traffic and just observe and have a look. You do not need to go into the detail of measuring lane widths, looking your head down to look at crossfalls and those sorts of things. The site inspection is to just gather that understanding of how it's operating, having a look around, thinking about the design that you've got and imagining it built in this and how it ties in and fits in and how people are going to use it and the like. So when you go out there, wear a high-vis vest, stay off the road. There's no need to be out there standing on the road. Don't be a hazard to others as well. So don't park in a place where you're going to be a hazard. Don't, if you're maybe out there with others, don't stand in the groups of people who have to walk onto the road to get around you. So just be conscious of all of that. And we do have a safe work method statement, which is in Moodle, which you're going to have to, agree to. It says very common sense stuff like don't go out there intoxicated and those sorts of things. And that, we've done a whole lot to make sure it's safe. And now you've got to take some responsibility as well and ensure that it's safe. And you'll operate under your organization's safety protocols. Okay. So let's jump into Moodle and have a look at a few things. So, bear with me a second. I'm just going to get that up on my screen. Okay, here we go. I'm going to use my second screen here. Okay, so hopefully you got yourself back into Moodle. If you haven't, you're going to have to find that again, or you can just email back to Kathy or Emma or whoever sent you the email about today's session and ask them, and they'll be able to re-establish your access and everything like that. So we've got some reference documents and resources here. And in there, you'll see the Safe System Assessment Framework Austroads document. So that's going to be a good one. I'm just going to open that up quickly because I do want to show you down, here we go. They start around page 19 there, and you can see runoff road crashes, and you can see primary treatments, and flexible barriers and things like that. You can see then supporting treatments. So there's two types of supporting. Just supporting is fine. And you can see different options there, center lines, audio tactile, and those sort of things. That's going to help you. It's got it there for head-on crashes, got it there for intersections. It's not everything, but it's just helps you get into the rhythm of that. You've got the different guidelines in there. You've got some templates, and you've got a few other things. They're all your resources, but you'll use those. But we're down at module 4 now, and you see there's the presentation. You got a quiz to do. Then you've got the safe work method statement there, and then I'll just click on that. This one will just be you're agreeing to operating safely during your site inspection. And then we've got this, complete your safe system assessment. This is your big assignment. You've got a bit of time on it, but let's jump into that. So you can see there, due date, 7th of March. I reckon there's probably a couple of hours of work in this for you. 2 to maybe 3, 3 hours work would be at the higher end. You should be able to do it relatively quickly. So what we've got here is a Word document, an Excel document, and then there's a whole lot of PDFs. And so you should be able to see your name next to one of these PDFs. And each of these will be a specific site and hopefully near where you are. Now, looks like there's a couple of you with 2 people. If you wanted to work with that person, you know that person, I'm sure you probably definitely know that person, but if you want to work with them, you can. I just ask that in your reporting, you both submit a report and you write both of your names on both reports, if that makes sense, just so I can go, okay, they work together on this. That's why they're the same. They work together. So let's have a look at this one. We got Pacific Highway. So you click on that, you'll get some sort of design. There we go. Some sort of hypothetical design. Looks like they're signalizing. There's a plan to signalize this. Seagull. It looks like a seagull to a signalized intersection. Very sort of mock-up-ish, but that's okay. It's, you know, this is just the idea of working it through, and you will then utilize this information and this design to do your design. You'll use the existing seagull intersection there as your baseline score and matrix, and then you'll, in your mind, go, okay, now it's a signalized intersection. How does that change? You're given some hypothetical traffic volumes. Now you might go, that's not right. Just use it. Okay. This is a training exercise. The purpose of it is to ensure that you're understanding this process, and just for the consistency and ease, we've done that. So 20,000 there for motorcyclists unknown volume. So you'll make your judgment call on that. 15, and so that's your design. Let's jump back, and then you've got my quiz questions. This is the template that you're going to use and you're going to fill out. And you can see there, I said, only fill out the highlighted stuff. We want to keep this streamlined for you. Only the highlighted stuff. So we don't need an executive summary. Of course, if you're doing a full one, you would do an executive summary. We don't need you to update the table of contents or figures or anything like that. But we do want you to put your name in there. So you would delete that, you put your name in. As I say, you'd put the name of the other person in your assessment team if there were 2 of you doing the same one that you wanted to work together. You can do it by yourself if you want. That's not a problem. This is where we would put project background and everything like that. Again, we're not going to ask you to do that just to save you time. Plus, some of the background of these projects would be very sketchy. Proposed works. So we want a short summary of what they're proposing, maybe a snip of that design that you could put in there, bit of something just for general context. And then you're into your assessment. You summarize the assessment. So you're probably going to do this after you're definitely going to do this after you've done your assessment. You can just give a little commentary around what's presenting the highest risk, the lowest risk. Then you give a existing condition score, a design option score. You've only got one design option to work with, and you will create your own graph and you'll replace it. And that's what the Excel is there for. I'll show you that in a second. But really, the first thing you're going to have to do is fill out the matrices. So you're going to do the existing conditions. You're going to fill out some info there, put in some dot points, put in your scores. And then you're going to take that, you're going to copy it. You're going to go down here. You're going to create another one. And then you're going to go through and you're going to cross out different factors that you've put in there using the little cross out, or you might add something, and then you'll make that a different color so it's easy to see that they're different. And then you can probably unhighlight the lot so it's quite easy to look at. So you'll fill those out, you'll populate this page, and then you'll go down to here and you'll put in primary treatments. So you'll list a few things here and here, and then maybe you'll come up with a few primary things, a few supporting things that you think would help this project. You leave project response blank. Okay, that is after you've made the treatment for consideration. That is a reminder to whoever's going to receive this report. Well, have a think about that and tell us what your thoughts are. Are you going to do it? Are you going to do something else? And so it's really left there as this real reminder that this report, something has to be done with it. It's not just going on a shelf. Something should be done with it. Then the last thing we want is a photo of you at the site to prove to us that you actually went out there, you looked at it, you thought about it, you looked at how it operated, you thought in context of how's this new design going to link in, tie in with the new stuff, how are people going to use it? Yeah, we're trying to, there's a bit of a development of a syllabus requirement for this course, and it does include this, getting out on site and actually looking at it from that perspective. So you're going to finish all of that. As I said there, the Excel is, for a group like this, probably don't need this at all because you whip up an Excel graph in no time whatsoever. But we do like to try to make it easy so you can just put your numbers in and you can see that the graph starts to appear. So and we're getting a graph, and then you can simply, or you can either just copy it and paste it into your Word document. So you then just delete this one. And let's go with a paste special just because I don't know what's coming. And there we go. You know, you can pop it in there. And you've got it nicely presented. Obviously, we're filling them all out, but just to try and make your life a little bit easier, there we created this little thing. Okay, so I'll jump back to, I'll just have a look at, see if there's any immediate questions that have popped up there. Okay, nothing yet. So what I'll do is I'm going to show you a real safe system assessment output just for, just so you get a bit of that general idea. So here's one, some colleagues doing, so I don't even know what the project is. I wasn't actually one of the assessors in this. So a couple of my colleagues were, but let's have a look at how they've gone. So you see the exec summary, we can see 172, 30, 24. Ultimate design option 2 looks to be the more favorable there. There we go, a nice little summary page. That's good. So I know where the intersection is. See the total scores. I can see what's going on there. Cyclists aren't faring well out of this, whatever they're planning. So I've got some good intel out of that straight away. Bit of summary information there, and we'll see that there'll be some recommendations or considerations down the end. Table of contents, background information about what a safe system assessment is. There's the team, and they went out to the site, and they just went out during the day. No, not a requirement to go out at night. Sometimes you do, but it's up to you as the assessment team. Bit of background intel, a bit of info on each of the existing conditions and the designs. So they've actually put a fair bit of info there. It's probably more than I would have expected in terms of describing it, but that's okay. Project context, and you can see the prompt questions we went through and some information around those. Gathering context. Some more info about Austroads. There's the standard scoring reference sheet. And here we are into a matrix. Now, they've gone and they've put the exposure up there, and they say that that's actually covering off all of these. Now, if it's above 10,000, everything's going to be 4 anyway. So 4, 4, 4, 4. Okay. Pedestrians, they've got a 3, cyclists, they've got a 2, motorcyclists 4. And then you can see there their likelihood justification. There's a bit there, isn't there? It's not just a you know, there's some actual thinking and justification and ups and downs, and that's got them to the scores. Then they've done the severity, and they've got to the scores. They've totaled it up, and that's how they've got to that. So then the next one down, very nicely formatted here, crossed out, bits added, new things in red, things that have gone, crossed out, nicely worked through. Scores that change, red, and they'll do it for 2 of those. And then they've got the totals and a bit of talking about those. Again, for your mock one, you're not going to do a lot of this written commentary around it. You're able to just sort of plonk it in a few little bits and pieces. You can see why we've streamlined it. There's a fair bit here. High-level comments on the other elements of the system. So not a huge amount of intel in there for this very, one signal local government intersection. Larger projects, you'd probably have more intel. And then here we go, ideas for consideration. So in this section, the section is recommendation, but ideas for consideration. And you can see there that these are primary ones. They've got a few primary ones. They've got those there. And then this one, these are supporting ones. And there's more supporting ones. A bit of conclusion, some photos, and a bit of the general intel, some crash history of the area, some land use analysis. Those are not driving the scores. Don't get confused. This is some sort of crash investigation type assessment. That is just general sort of understanding, helping them think generally about the area. Okay, so you're going to go into the middle. You're going to download that. You're going to populate it. You're going to fill it all out, maybe PDF it, and then you're going to upload it. Now I'm in the one to grade it. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So then you'll see there, you'll go add submission, and you'll drop your assessment in there, and you'll submit it. So if we go back to here, that's, module 4, quiz. Agree that you're going to be safe out there, or you're going to act safely, and we've assessed it. Finish your submission. Then when we have our final session, you've got one small quiz, you provide the course feedback, and then you'll get your certificate. So I think that is pretty much a good spot for me to see if anybody's got any questions on the task at hand, how to do those safe system assessments. Feel free to pop your hand up if you just want to talk rather than type it in. Otherwise, we'll be able to give you 10 minutes to maybe do that quiz and get your head around what your assignment is. Now, of course, we're here to help. So if you download that, you look at it and you go, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, or I can't work this out. get in contact. Shoot me an email, shoot Kathy or Emma or whoever's emailed you about this course, just email them. We can organize a one-on-one Zoom, or Teams meeting. I can have a chat with you about it. We can work that through. You can shoot an email through, happy to answer it. Yeah, feel free to work with other people if you want. That's fine. I'm okay with that. In fact, we do safe system assessments in teams anyway. Yeah, so just put both your names on it. I think that's about. If the site, you just go, well, I've moved. I'm now 200 kilometers away from that site. Just tell us. We will create another site for you. Find another site for you. Some of you will maybe have a real project, and a lot of you will have hypothetical projects. So obviously, if the community comes out and asks what you're doing or what's being planned, just say you're on a training exercise. Please don't do community consultation as part of this this training course. It's going to cause everybody trouble. I think we're pretty good. Any final questions? I'll just pause to see if anything comes through or anybody pops up their hand. Yes, no, you won't call. You won't get them to call me, Brad. I'm not talking to any community about hypothetical projects. All right. Well, I think you'll enjoy it. Don't do enough to prove that you understand the process. You understand what exposure likelihood and severity is. You've scored it. You put some good recommendations in. You categorize them. We don't need to see a report the length of that one I just showed you. Just give us enough to show us that you understand those things. It'll get marked. You'll get some feedback. If you don't get the 80% that we need, you'll get some feedback, and then it'll just be updating and resubmitting. You've got 3 attempts at that. I think you'll all enjoy it. I enjoy it. I think you'll like the process. But yeah, please keep in contact as you do it. Thank you very much. And yeah, shame I wasn't there in person with you, but I think you'll get out there and enjoy some field work regardless. Thank you very much. Get in contact if you've got any questions. Have a good day.